Karl Marx, a German philosopher, and Friedrich Engels, a German thinker, created the theory of Marxism together. Marx came from a lawyer's family but lived most of his life in poverty after being forced to leave Germany during the 1848 revolutions. He settled in Britain. Engels moved to Manchester in 1842 to work at his father's textile factory. The two met after Marx read an article Engels had written. They both wrote for the same journal. Marx and Engels called their ideas communism, not Marxism. Their main belief was that industries, transportation, and other key parts of the economy should be owned by the state, not by private individuals. They introduced these ideas in the Communist Manifesto published in 1848. The main goal of Marxism is to create a classless society where everything needed to produce and exchange goods is shared by everyone. Marxism is a materialist philosophy, meaning it tries to explain the world using real scientific facts, not through religion or beliefs in a spiritual world, which is what idealist philosophies do. Marx once said that while other thinkers only try to understand the world, Marxism aims to change it. Marxists believe that history is driven by class struggle, conflicts between different classes over money, power, and status. In their view, modern capitalism, especially in the 1800s, was built on the exploitation of workers by the owners of factories and businesses. This exploitation leads to alienation, a feeling of disconnection. Workers no longer see the whole process of what they produce. Instead, they do small, repetitive tasks without understanding the full picture. In the past, when people worked in small home-based businesses, they made entire products themselves and knew who would use them. Marx also talked about reification, a term from his book Das Kapital. It means treating people like things. In capitalism, workers are often seen as part of the machine, as labor, not as full human beings. Companies focus only on money, not on how their decisions affect real people. Many ideas influenced Marxism. One big influence was the German philosopher Hegel, who said that progress happens through conflict between opposing ideas, a process called the dialectic. Marxism also drew from French socialist ideas and challenged economic theories that said people acting out of self-interest would help society as a whole. Marxists see society as made up of two parts: the base, which is the economy, how things are made and shared and sold. Second, the superstructure, everything else, like ideas, art, religion, laws, etc. Traditional Marxism believes that the superstructure is shaped by the base. This idea is called economic determinism, meaning that culture and ideas are not neutral, they are influenced by who controls the economy. Marx and Engels did not create a detailed theory about literature. Their views on art were open-minded. They believed that while economic conditions influence art in the long run, good art still has some freedom from those pressures. For example, in 1888, Engels wrote English writer Margaret Harkness saying he did not mind that she had not written a clearly socialist novel. In fact, he said the less the author's opinions show, the better the art. Like many well-educated Germans of their time, Marx and Engels respected great art and literature. They wanted to make it clear that true art is different from propaganda. Still, Marxist literary criticism believes that a writer's social class and its ideology, that is, its values, beliefs, and assumptions, strongly influence what the writer creates. Instead of viewing writers as purely original geniuses who produce timeless works, Marxists see writers as shaped by their society, even if they don't realize it themselves. This influence can be seen not only in the themes of their writing, but also in the form, the structure, and style of their work. For example, the Marxist critic Terry Eagleton says that even language and grammar can reflect and support an organized political system. Catherine Belsey, another Marxist critic, argues that the traditional form of the realist novel supports the current social system. Realism, by the world in a familiar and normal way, stops readers from questioning it. This includes things like stories with clear beginnings and endings, detailed character development, chronological timelines, and fixed points of view. On the other hand, the strange and fragmented styles used by modern writers like Samuel Beckett and Franz Kafka are seen as reactions to the confusion and problems of modern capitalist society. However, traditional Marxist criticism often talks about history in broad terms, like general conflicts between social classes or big historical changes. It usually does not explore specific historical details or link them closely to particular literary texts. This is one way it differs from cultural materialism and new historicism, two approaches from the 1980s that focus more on detailed historical documents. These critics tried to recreate how people thought and felt during specific historical moments. After Marx and Engels, some Marxist critics took a much stricter approach to literature, stricter than what Marx and Engels themselves would have agreed with. In the 1920s, soon after the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union actually encouraged modern experimental art. But by the 1930s, things changed. The government began to control all areas of life, including literature and the arts. At the first Soviet Writers' Congress in 1934, open-minded views were banned. A new set of strict rules was introduced, not based on Marx or Engels, but mainly on Lenin's ideas. Lenin had written in 1905 that literature should serve the political goals of the Communist Party. He believed writers should support the party's work and be part of its organized effort. This meant creative freedom was shut down. Writers like Proust and Joyce, known for their experimental styles, were attacked. Joyce's Ulysses, for example, was called a heap of dung crawling with worms. Instead, the only acceptable style was socialist realism, a very straightforward and realistic form of writing that promoted communist values. Critic George Steiner explained that there were two major types of Marxist literary criticism. The Engelsian type, which allowed for more freedom in art and did not demand that literature directly follow politics. The Leninist type, which insisted that art must openly support left-wing political causes. Many people outside the Soviet Union who supported communism also tried to follow the official Soviet line, especially after 1934. This strict cause and effect view of literature became known as vulgar Marxism. In this view, a writer's work was seen as completely shaped by their social class and economic position. Writers had no escape from these conditions. One well-known example of this strict approach is Christopher Caldwell's book Illusion and Reality, written in the 1930s and published later in 1946. Caldwell did not look closely at individual texts. Instead, he made broad claims, linking everything about a writer to their class background. For instance, he said that poet Robert Browning's complicated vocabulary reflected his refusal to deal honestly with real social problems. Similarly, he claimed that Tennyson escaped into fantasy and Browning wrote about the distant past because both were avoiding the problems of the middle class world they represented. From the 1930s onwards, a more open-minded kind of Marxist literary criticism what Steiner calls Engelsian started to grow, even though it was often underground, in exile, or not officially allowed. A group known as the Russian formalists had already been active in the 1920s before the Communist Party shut them down. While their work was not strictly Marxist, it is still important. Key members of this group included Viktor Slovatsky, Boris Tomaszewski, and Boris Eichenbaum. Their work is collected in the book Russian Formalist Criticism, 4 essays edited by Lemon and Reis. Let's see some of their main ideas. Literature should be studied closely for its form, that is, how it is written, not just what it says. Literary language is special and different from everyday language. Slovatsky introduced the idea of defamiliarization, which means making the familiar seem strange or new. So we see the world differently and think more deeply about it. This is explained in his famous essay, Art as Technique. Tomaszewski made an important distinction between story, the basic sequence of events, and plot, how those events are presented in the text. The plot might mix up the order, repeat things, or change focus to make a stronger effect. These ideas show that literature does not just reflect real life like a mirror, it shapes and changes how we see reality. Later in the 1990s and 1960s, these ideas influenced early structuralist critics who were interested in how language and meaning are built through systems and patterns. Some Russian formalists stayed in the Soviet Union like Mikhail Bakhtin, but others like Roman Jakobson left the country. Jakobson moved to Prague and helped form the Prague Linguistic Circle, which included René Wellek. Both men later moved to America before World War II and influenced the development of new criticism. This approach focused on reading literary texts very closely and understanding the special features of literary language. Russian formalist ideas also spread to Germany, where they influenced the Frankfurt School, a group of Marxist thinkers who combined Marxist ideas with psychology, especially Freud, and formalist methods. Important members of this group were Walter Benjamin, who died while fleeing the Nazis, Herbert Marcuse, who influenced radical politics in the 1960s, and Theodor Adorno. Another key figure who fled Germany was the playwright Bertolt Brecht, who disagreed with the rigid rules of socialist realism. Brecht developed the idea of the alienation effect, which means reminding the audience during a play that what they are watching is not real life. For example, in his play Galileo, a character acting as a director might sit on stage reading the script aloud. This technique is similar to defamiliarization because it encourages the audience to think critically instead of getting emotionally lost in the story. Many modern Marxist ideas about literature have been influenced by the French thinker Louis Althusser. One of his important ideas is overdetermination, a term borrowed from Freud. It means that events or situations happen not because of just one cause like the economy, but because of many causes working together. This idea helps move away from the old oversimplified Marxist idea that the economy alone controls everything else like art or culture. Another idea is relative autonomy. It means that even though art and culture are influenced by economics, they also have some independence. So, literature does not just reflect the economy, it can have its own role and meaning. Ideology is a key concept in Althusser and for Marxism in general. Althusser defines it as a system of ideas, beliefs, or images that exist within society and shapes how people think. In simpler terms, ideology is the way society spreads its values, often in a way that people does not even realize. Literature is part of this system because it helps pass on these values. Althusser says that the economy still influences everything, but only in the last instance, that is, not directly or all the time. This allows far more flexibility than traditional Marxism. He also uses the term decentering, which means there is no single center or main cause in society. Again, this moves away from the idea that economics is the only thing that matters, or influenced by economics but not completely controlled by it. What Marxist critics do. Marxist critics often look beneath the surface of a story to find deeper meanings. They believe that even if a story is not obviously political, it can still reflect class conflict or big changes in society. For example, in King Lear, the struggles in the story can be seen as representing the fight between the old ruling class, like kings and nobles, and the new rising middle class. Some critics look at the background and class of the author to understand the story. They think writers may read. In his book, A Marxist Study of Shakespeare's Comedies, Elliot Krieger uses a Marxist approach to look at Twelfth Night, especially the first method of Marxist criticism, looking beneath the surface of the story to uncover hidden class issues. The play's main story is about Duke Orsino's love for Lady Olivia. He constantly talks about his love, but she refuses him at first because she is mourning her father. Later, Olivia falls in love with Viola, a noble woman who is as a man and works for Orsino under the name Cesario. Olivia's servant Malvalio also loves her, but her uncle Sir Toby Belk tricks Malvalio into thinking Olivia loves him back. Most critics see the play as showing extreme behaviors like Orsino's dreamy love life and Sir Toby's wild partying, balanced by Malvalio's overly serious, strict behavior. These critics say the play teaches moderation, but Krieger disagrees. He points out that this view ignores the role of social class in the story. At the end of the play, the rich characters like Orsino and Olivia end up fine, while Malvalio suffers a harsh fate. Krieger argues this shows how society gives the upper class to indulge in their desires, while people like Malvalio from a lower class don't get the same luxury. For example, Orsino and Olivia can obsess over love and grief, and Sir Toby can drink and act responsibly. But Malvalio is expected to stay controlled and serious because of his social rank. Krieger says each rich character escapes into a private world. Sir Toby hides from responsibility through drinking. Olivia uses grief to avoid dealing with others. Orsino is trapped in his fantasy of love, making everything for himself. In these private worlds, they act as if they are kings of their own space, not part of a shared community. Viola also tries to hide in a private world, but her disguise as a servant means she becomes someone the rich characters use for their own needs. Even though Viola is secretly noble, her pretend lower class role puts her in a different position. Among the servants, there is a sense of ambition. Viola, as Cesario, replaces other close servants of Orsino. In Olivia's house, Maria and Malvalio Both try to move up by marrying into the family. Maria succeeds and marries Sir Toby. Krieger sees her as important because she shows traits of middle class values, independence, cleverness, and the belief that people should rise in society based on talent. In contrast, Malvolio does not represent real challenge. He respects the upper class too much and thinks he can become one of them just by luck or destiny, his stars. Krieger sees this idea of fortune in the play as a way the upper class justifies their privilege, as if it is natural or meant to be. From a Marxist point of view, the play shows the deep divide between the rich and the servants. It also reveals how each class thinks and behaves. Krieger's main contribution is to bring up social class, a topic that most critics usually ignore when writing about this play.